Good morning. So I've prepared this series of video. It's going to be little video snippets, we'll say, because I've had several friends that have requested just lessons on making sourdough bread. Because sourdough is a 2-day process, we're going to break it down into just the steps, and I think this is going to be easier than trying to do this in person, since it does take a number of hours, so broken down into just little segments of steps that need to be done. So in a moment we will go through step 1, which is our feeding the starter. Okay, so step number 1 is going to be feeding the starter. This starter was just fed a couple of days ago, so it's still a little active. There's not a lot of what they call the hooch, which is that liquid. If you can see the liquid in there, it usually builds up a little bit of liquid. I made bread a few days ago, so this is still fairly active. I'm just going to carefully pour off that liquid. The bread I made a few days ago, I rushed the process, so it turned out a little dense. Even though I've been doing this a few years, I still can make mistakes. So you can see it's still a little bubbly because it's still nice and fresh. But what I'm going to do, because today I'm making a double batch, is I'm going to put a good amount, well, if it'll get off my spoon, I'm going to put a good amount in my jar. Now this jar is nothing fancy, just any glass jar will work for feeding your starter. This actually happened to be a candle at one time, and after the candle was gone I thoroughly cleaned it, and it has been a great starter jar. And just because it has plenty of room. Let's see. So that's the first step. I leave at least a good tablespoon or more in the jar. Right now I'm going to leave a little extra because that's probably, well, we'll do a little bit more. You want to always leave at least a full heaping tablespoon of starter in the jar, because you're going to need to, that's going to go back in the fridge. Rarely do I discard because I make bread often enough, but if I had like a jar full, I would discard, and usually I just put it in compost. Is the best way to discard. There are also fantastic recipes all over the internet that tell you different recipes you can use up the discard if you had a lot of starter and you just didn't need to use it all. So next thing I'm going to do, I've already kind of pre-warmed the water. Use this little Thermo Pro digital thermometer. Fantastic. This is great for grilling, baking, all kinds of cooking. And I just kind of want to make sure. Now I can tell the temperature that I'm looking for, but you want around anywhere from 100 to 110. You don't want it to go over 115, because 115 will kill your starter. So you don't want your water to ever be over 115. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of water. I don't put much in the starter jar because, again, I'm just putting that back in the fridge for the next batch. This I'm going to fill up a little bit more, just because I've got to have plenty to make a double batch. So we're going to stir that in. I just stir that up good to get the starter mixed in well with the warm water. And of course this jar is reused a lot, so it can get a little messy, but I forgot to grab a spatula. I usually use a spatula to clean this up later, but we'll clean that up later. My handy camera helper is going to hand me a spatula. Awesome. Thank you. Alright. So it's, like I said, you just want to stir that up a little bit before adding the flour. Now the flour that I'm using here is some that I ground. I grind my own wheat berries a lot of times. So this is just a blend that I use of hard wheat, white wheat, and another kind of grain that I can't recall the name of right this second. I don't know, kamut. It's kamut, which is a lovely little grain. So I just do this is kind of like just my blend, and I keep it in the freezer because that protects the nutrients the best. So I said we're just going to feed this. This is one of those things, it's trial and error, even for me. Sometimes I have to add a little extra water if I get too much. Usually I'm just adding a little bit, continually adding a little bit more flour until I get the right consistency. So I like, you know, somebody said pancake batter. I like it a little thicker than pancake batter because I want to make sure that the flour is what really feeds your starter, gives it something to consume. And so this one's already good. So you want it nice and thick, like this. I don't know if you can see that. You just want it good and thick.
Move your hand.
A nice thick batter. And like I said, that'll go back in the fridge in just a moment. But we want to go ahead and get this one going. Make sure we've got enough flour in here. And we don't. And I'm probably going to end up with more fed starter than I need at the end. And what I'll do with that is I'll just throw it back in the jar in the fridge. It'll be good until the, you know, stir it in for the next time I make bread. So I'm just going to keep adding until I get the consistency that I like. It's really nice if you see some bubbles, you know, in this process, but it's not like mandatory. But it just means bubbles mean air, and which is going to give air ultimately to your bread, which is why we feed it and let it sit. So this is nice and thick. And because this starter is recently used, because I made, like I said, made bread a few days ago, probably only going to take a few hours. But you see maybe some bubbles in there. Like I said, which isn't mandatory. It just means it's still kind of active, and we're going to get it very much activated. But you can see how nice and thick that is. So you want that consistency. Like I said, I know some people do less, but I tend to like it on the thick side to give it plenty to consume. So just do a little cleanup. That'll go back in the, well, that's not the lid. Oh, here's the lid. This goes back in the freezer until we start making bread, and I'll use some of it for that. But I always like to feed my starter with the whole wheat. I use different grains, and you'll see when I'm making the bread, I'll do a combination of wheat that I have ground up and a little bit of organic all-purpose and a little bit of organic bread flour. So just bring that up a little bit, and that will go back in the refrigerator till the next time I need it. And like I said, if I make too much starter, I can take this starter and any leftover, and you'll see when we get to the next step what I'm talking about, but any leftover will go back in that jar and get just stirred in and kept in the fridge until the next time I bake bread or something else that I need sourdough for. Because occasionally I like to make sourdough bagels. Sourdough pancakes can be really good. There's a few things you can make. Now, like I said, this is just an old candle jar. I take the rubber band, which is just any old rubber band, and I just like to place it so that it's level. Let's just rubber band glue. Kind of level, because what you want is you want it to rise up to about double. So we're going to set this aside for a few hours in a warm spot because it's summertime. I can just leave it on the stovetop or on the counter or anywhere. I use just a little mesh thing. You can use little fabric, cheesecloth, whatever you have. You want it to be able to breathe, so, and another rubber band goes on that. And that is the fed starter. And we'll just set it aside and come back in a few hours and see what it's going to look like. It will change in texture. It'll have a lot more bubbles, and it'll be a really almost what I call a goopy texture, which is nice for starting your bread. So that is step 1. Okay, so it's been it was 4.5 hours. It was perfect, and I couldn't get to it right away. It's okay. It's just gone down a little bit. It was higher, but you can definitely see probably bubbles on the side of the jar. You look at the nice bubbles there, and of course the top, if you can see, is very foamy and ready to go, basically. So we are going to...
A few moments later.
Okay, I didn't have my spoon. I needed a big spoon just to scoop this out. So I have my bowl here and a scale. I love the scale. We go with everything goes by grams.
Zeroed out.
So zero it out at grams, and I'm looking for 200 grams because I'm doing a double batch. You can see how this stuff looks as I'm pouring it out. You can see all the bubbles, and it's like I said, kind of goopy if you were looking at it. It's a nice texture, and I'm just going to go 200, right about 200 grams. I'll set that aside, and the rest will go back in the fridge. Then we are going to zero that out and go 650 grams of warm water, and I've already got that with my little digital.
What temp?
Got it the right temperature, between 110 and 1. You don't want it over 115. Like I said, that'll kill your starter. So you keep it under the 115. It's going to 650, and I just went over 650. So I'm gonna try to. Sometimes it's a little trick. Sometimes, and I'm scooping back out a little bit of water because it's easy to, those grams doesn't take much. Okay, a little bit of mess, it's okay, it all cleans up. So I'm going to just zero that out, stir that up right quick.
What's that thing? In your hand.
Oh, this, sorry, this is a Danish whisk. This is what I use to mix everything together, and I'm just going to give it a quick little stir so that the water and the starter is all nicely incorporated. Put it back on the scale, zero the scale back out because of course now the Danish whisk is weighted. Going to add some salt. I use Redmond natural salt, which is from Utah, and I'll show you. It's a beautiful color. It is real salt, and it is really good, and I keep it in a jar. So I want 20 grams of that. I said, I try to stick as close to the measurements as I can. If we go a little over, that can happen quickly because of grams. Alright, now I'm going to add flour. I can add up to 1,000 grams of flour for this recipe, but I usually stop around 950, take off the scale, and then start going by what the texture looks like, if it looks like it needs more or not. And in this case, I'm just trying to get it to a nice consistency. So start off, I'm going to I try to do about half and half right now because we use this as a regular sandwich bread every day, and we like a nicer texture, lighter texture. I go about half, maybe of the all-purpose flour, which is organic, and then about half with the whole wheat and the bread flour, because my bread flour is organic and it is all wheat, all the germ and the bran and everything is blended into it. So that's a lot of grains. So I like I said, do about half and half. So I'm going to zero it out again, and this is where I just kind of pour some in, do about 200 of the grain mix that I talked about earlier, which most of my grains, the berries I get off of Amazon, and the, we'll go about 200 on I get the berries on Amazon from a farm in Oregon currently, I think, or Washington State. And then I get most of the bread flour I actually got from Azure Standard, which if you're interested, they sell, it's an organic farm, they sell all organic stuff. So get that from there. It's a really good blend, and then the all-purpose flour I just bought on Amazon, so organic. So I'm gonna get this mixed together to about 500 of that or so. Then we're gonna add our all-purpose. Like I said, I'm gonna go up to about 950. As this sits, after I mix it up, it's got to sit for about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's going to soak up that water is going to, or the grains are going to be soaked up. I guess the water is soaking up the grains, I should say. So when you're using a lot of whole grain, you just want to be aware of that. That's why I don't just pour 100. If I put 1,000 grams of, flour in here, it would be too much, and that just wouldn't be good. So at this point, I'm going to take it off of the scale and basically use my Danish whisk and just get it all stirred up the best I can with a Danish whisk. It starts getting stiff after a little while, but we just want to get all of that incorporated. The salt, the flour, the water. That's all the ingredients you need for sourdough, a good sourdough bread. Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And of course, the sourdough starter itself, of course, is in there. My wonderful hubby cameraman reminded me that she started asking questions after the first video. So we do have some questions that he had that I'm going to go over after I get this done. But I needed to get this done. One thing I'll say is I didn't babysit the starter a whole lot. I just checked it every couple of hours. It wasn't moving along as fast as I wanted it to, so I did put it in the oven for a little bit, which is what I do in the winter time. I kind of have to put it in the oven with the light on. It just keeps it just warm enough to activate that starter really well. So that's what I did today because I was ready to get this process moving along. Because there are a couple of hours worth, several hours worth of things that we will do after it's been sitting, and we'll go over that in the next step. But for now, it still, to me, looks like there's a lot of moisture there. It's going to be very, well, actually it's not that sticky. It's a little bit of sticky, but I am going to put just a little bit more flour in it, just to make it a little easier to handle when it is time to handle. Now I won't be handling it right now. Like I said, it's going to sit for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'll come back and start. I'll knead it for a few minutes, and then we have a series of what's called stretch and fold that we do to the bread, and that helps develop the gluten, which makes it rise nicely and makes for good bread. So I'm going to stop at that. It's still a little sticky, but as it sits, like I said, it'll soak up that flour, and we can always add little bits of flour as we go through the steps, and I usually do have to, just to keep it from sticking to me. I love this little thing. This is, I guess, kind of like a plastic bench scraper, and it just works good to get the dough off of the hook, Danish hook, and then it also is great for scraping it around the bowl. It's great for picking it up when you need to pick it up later on. Like I said, this will make 2 loaves, 2 nice sized loaves, so we'll be doing that at a later point. And this little guy is great for getting all the sticky off of your fingers for the most part. Yeah, it's still pretty sticky. That's okay. And I just take it and take this scraper and go around the bowl. Just make sure I don't have, like, sometimes you get a lot, you see some of the dry flour at the bottom. Sometimes even with that Danish hook, there's still some dried flour, so I just take this little thing and scrape it off at the sides of the bowl, get it all nicely incorporated. Go ahead and put a little shape to the dough. So we get it all in a nice little ball, sort of. This sounds great. We're getting it all, help it get all mixed in. And I'm just doing this a couple of times. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is cover it. You can cover it with a tea towel, plastic wrap if you wanted. I actually use, this is going to sound crazy, but I buy these little very cheap disposable shower curtains from, I've bought them from Walmart in the past.
A shower cap.
And the shower cap, sorry, not shower curtain. Thank you, Cameron. So I cover it with that. It just works great. They're reusable, so it covers it, keeps it from drying out for the next little bit while we're letting it sit, and I can use that over and over again. So that is that step. Okay, handy dandy little shower cap. You reuse these over and over again, and that gives a nice cover to it, and it's ready to sit for a while. Okay, so it's been about an hour, and we are going to take and just sprinkle a little flour on the island, dump our dough out, and start the kneading. And I like to knead it by hand. Hubby asked the question of why I didn't use the KitchenAid, because I do with some other breads use the KitchenAid, and I guess my answer is because I just never have. I suppose you could pick it up at this point, put it in the machine, and do 5 minutes of knead time, because there are definitely other things that I need with the KitchenAid. But I just like doing it this way, and that's what the original recipe called for, so I guess that's my answer is I don't, but I'm thinking you could if you wanted to. So the biggest thing is, it is still a little sticky, so I'll be adding some flour along and along as I do this. And you just want to take and pick it up and smash it down, and when it starts getting too sticky, just throw a little bit extra, like I can feel. This is the best time to add a little bit of flour, because you're really mashing into it. And what you're really doing is just getting everything good and mixed, and starting to incorporate, get that gluten going. Like I said, this is a good time to add, although I can add even during the stretch and folds. So just go for a few minutes. I'm trying to think of any questions that we had after the last session, and I can't think of any that I could try to answer while I'm doing this. You can see I'm just trying to keep it all from sticking to my hands so much while I'm doing this, and I'll just do this for a few minutes. Some people say go 5 minutes. I don't see the need in that, because it starts smoothing out and looking really nice after a few minutes. And it's just a nice little rhythm. Sticky, sticky.
So I had some questions about winter feeding.
Oh yeah, so feeding the starter, I did touch on that normally I have to put it in the oven with the light on, and that seems to do better. It does take a little bit longer. One thing I did a while back, because I had not been using my starter, I had been doing other breads, was just to kind of reactivate it. I actually fed it at night and let it just sit on the counter overnight. And that got it really good and bubbly the next morning. And then what I did was I took part of it and fed it again, just because you don't want to feed the whole thing. You'd end up with a huge you know, it would expand out of the jar. But you want to just take a small amount and feed that small amount, and then use that as your active starter. But it super activates it, gets it nice and very bubbly. You know, when you've fed it and then take a portion and feed it again. Now I'm just kind of pulling it to create a little bit of tension in it. That's pretty good. We'll probably put a little bit more. Like I said, we're still doing a little stickiness, but it'll keep picking up this. So let me just throw that back in the bowl, and we wait 30 minutes to start our stretch and fold. We do cover this. So we'll be back in 30 minutes. Oh, and a real quick note, if you're tied up in 30 minutes and you've got something else that you're doing and you don't have time, it's okay. If it sits here for an hour or so, that's okay. The beauty of this bread is you work it in your schedule. So I learned even early on when I first started making it that even with a full-time job, I could make it work in my schedule. And it's not a true, you know, it's not really fussy for the most part, especially this stage where you're just going through and I knead it and then I do the stretch and pulls every 20 minutes. But that's not got to be set in stone. If I'm busy doing something else and it takes 45 minutes or an hour to get back to it, it's okay. It'll still be all right. Okay. Okay, so a couple of questions that have come up. How big of a starter jar do you need? For the one that stays in the fridge, I use just a small, like I guess that's a pint size. And then because the jar I use is actually, you know, when I'm feeding the starter, is actually like I said, an old candle jar. You can use probably a quart jar would be fine. That would be big enough. You just want to make sure, since this, once you feed the starter, it should double in size. You just want to make sure you have plenty of room so that it's not like, you know, over boiling over the top. On that subject, the temperature for the starter, you know, you just want it in a nice, you know, warmish area. Used to, I would put it on top of the fridge and that would be warm enough. But I found that because we keep it a little cool in the winter time, I had to put it in the oven and turn the light on to get it warm enough. And that just kind of speeds it up. I mean, ultimately, it's all the starter would get nice and bubbly if you leave it long enough. But I usually don't want to wait like all day and then try to start everything at night because there are a lot of steps, and you want to get through all of the steps before, you know, you're staying up till midnight just to get the dough ready to go in the fridge for the next day. So that's usually what I do, is just put it in, even in the summertime, I can put it in the oven because of course we're running the air, so the house is cooler. So there's, you know, little effect there on the starter feeding, you know, what temperature is. And as to the discard, you just want to make sure, I know I mentioned that we throw it in the compost. I'll put it in my compost pile. You just don't want to put it down the sink because it's basically water and flour, so it's like glue. You don't want to chug that down your sink. So if you don't want to find another recipe that uses discard, and you don't want to, you know, if you've got a lot of it, like say if you were gonna, I talked about super activating the starter by letting it go all night and then taking a portion of that and feeding it again. You know, you would have some extra. So if you didn't want to do something else with it, you know, you just definitely don't want to put it down the sink. I think that's all the questions for now. Of course, once this video uploads, any questions, feel free to ask and I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so now it's been over 30 minutes. We're going to start a set of what's called a stretch and fold. And basically, you just got to take the little scooper, helps, and then you just take and pull it up and fold it back over on itself. Turn the bowl a quarter and just do this all the way around. We do about 3 sets of stretch and folds. I'm not going to video every single one of them because it gets a little redundant. But as you're working with it, the dough will start to come together a little nicer. It gets a little smoother, a little less sticky. Sticky is not really a problem unless it's sticking to you so much you can't work with it. But you want it, you want to leave it soft. You don't want it so dried out and hard that you end up with just a dry, hard mess of dough. So, like I said, we're just going to do this. And the only time I'll go more than 3 sets is if it's just still like this and still kind of sticky and I feel like it just needs a little bit more work. But most of the time, 3 sets is enough. And I schedule it 20 minutes apart. I use my little timer on my watch. Comes in real handy. That way if I go outside and do something or get busy doing something else, it's just right there, a little reminder for me to, hey, get back on the dough and do something with it. You can see it's still kind of sticky. I still got a bit of dough sticking to me, so I just kind of put that back on there. It's fine. And I'll cover this back up and come back again in 20 minutes. But I will have the camera rolling for the final stretch and fold, where I then put it on the counter, stretch and fold, and then I start shaping it. And then we do a bulk rise for an hour. So, see you in a bit. Okay, so we did on the last stretch and fold, things were looking really good. So this is going to be our final stretch and fold. And so I'm going to just show you the difference in the dough. It stretches up real nice at this point. I got that in there. And I'm just going to do a quick round of that. And then we're going to take it out on the counter, shape it, and then it's going to go for a bulk rise. The bulk rise should be 45 minutes to an hour, uncovered. Now this is one where you don't want to walk away and leave it and forget about it, because it will dry out. So an hour is your max. After that you have to take and shape it again and put it in the Bannetons, which we will cover in the next video. I'm going to go ahead and throw this on the counter. And of course, I thought it would just, yeah, pretty much it just comes right out at this point, because it's gotten past that sticky stage. So it's not real sticky. And I'm just gonna say that, and it's gonna stick. Just roll it right quick. And all you want to do is create tension on the loaf. You can see right there some bubbles. That is where we're already getting the starter is doing its thing, creating bubbles in your dough. And so you don't want to pop those bubbles. You can just work around them. They'll stay there. There will be more. So I'm just doing what's called creating tension by pulling it to you. You don't want the counter to be too, actually that is probably, sometimes they're not bubbles, so sometimes they're little places where some stuff has gotten stuck, and it's okay. We'll get more bubbles. So I just like it nice and smooth, so I'm going to keep doing it for a couple of seconds, just till it's to a nice and smooth, everything's smooth all around. Oh yeah, we got a real big bubble coming up on this side now, as you can see right there. So, just going to turn that around, trying to get it all nice and smooth.
So you don't pop the bubble?
No, I don't. You just keep working around it. Okay, and then that's just going to go plop it back in the bowl just like that. Nice ball. You see where it is. It should rise up. It's not going to like fill the bowl or anything, but in the next hour it should rise up. Then we'll kind of take it, punch it down a little bit, divide it, and then I will put it in shape 2 loaves and put them in the Banneton, and I'll review that when we get to that. So like I said, this is just going to sit on the counter for an hour, and then we'll be back. Okay, So, little change of plan. I did have to cover it and put it in the fridge because we were right in the middle of dinner and I had people over for dinner. So, I just put it in the fridge, but it did rise a little bit. That's what it looks like. And I'm going to pop it out here and put it, these are my Bannetons. They're little wicker things with a cloth lining. You're not supposed to wash the cloth unless they get really bad off. So what I'll do, what I generally do is just shake a little bit of flour in both of them. And just get it nice and flour so that the stuff doesn't stick. So that the dough doesn't stick. And then, I don't need a whole lot of flour on the counter, but...
And what did you do with the dough because you were running dinner?
Oh, I covered it and put it in the refrigerator so that it would stop rising. I didn't want it to rise any further. So you see it's a little dry on top because it sat and dried out, but it'll be okay. We'll go through here and reshape it and it'll look all nice and new again. So that'll be fine. So I'll take this one and I just kind of do that, roll it up, and go back and do that little shaping thing. Yeah, I usually make, this is the smaller one, make it slightly smaller for Mom. I put it in the round one and it's just right for her. So just do that and then you actually put that down like that. So if there's any seams on the bottom, you just kind of pinch them closed and that's good. Now that's going to sit in the fridge overnight and I will bake it sometime tomorrow. I cover it with the cover like that, put that one in the fridge, and then we're going to go on to the next one. And I just kind of roll that back up. Now because I like to create the tension, I will make this one round. You see that big old bubble there? And that's fine. That's good. You want bubbles. I make it round first off just because I can create the most tension. And then I just start creating tension and make it more of a loaf. And this is just one of those things you just get used to doing. There's tons of videos out there that show you how to do this, but it's pretty simple. You're just wanting to create a little tension. It kind of smooths out the top. And again, like I said, it goes in upside down. And there's a couple of seams, so we're going to just close up those, pinch them closed. Once it sits in the refrigerator overnight, it's going to rise up a little bit, and all of this will be smooth in the morning, so you wouldn't even see it. I just like to do that. And just kind of tuck it around, make sure it's a good size. So I'm going to cover that one, put it in the fridge. It's going to sit in the fridge overnight. Probably best to go, a good 12 hours. I think my problem with the last loaf was I rushed it and I was out late at night still doing this, and then cooked the bread early the next morning. So it did not rise up as nicely as it should have, and ended up being a more dense loaf. We ate it anyway. It was still delicious and fine. It's just a little bit more dense, less airy. So this, like I said, will go in the fridge for the night. And we'll cook it tomorrow, and we will do videos when I take it out of the fridge in the morning and go through that process. Good morning. So I went ahead and baked the first loaf because I needed to get that in the oven this morning. I'm going to take that out of the oven right quick. And even though I scored it, and I will explain the scoring in a minute, it really ripped open. So carefully get that over there on the cooling rack. I'll have to go ahead. Oh, let me show you this. I made this handy dandy little, all it is a piece of aluminum foil made into a snake and then coiled. The coil keeps the bottom of the bread from burning in the Dutch oven. I'm going to pop that Dutch oven back in the oven for just a moment while we take carefully take the parchment paper out from under loaf number 1. And I will reuse it for loaf number 2. We'll show you right quick the bottom, because you can kind of tell there's a swirl there, but if I didn't have the little thing on the bottom of the Dutch oven, the bottom of the bread would burn. So I don't make the prettiest of loaves, but they do come out delicious. And you can see, even though I scored it, it does tend to open up a little bit more than I wanted it to. But it'll still be good eating. It'll be fine. So we're going to take out loaf number 2. I like to do these back to back while the oven's hot. Now I do put the oven on 460. This is what it looks like in the morning. It doesn't rise up a whole lot. This one's the smaller one. Just kind of brushing that flour smoothly. You can see this. Yeah, that's what happens with parchment paper. But it'll still work. 460 degrees, and you leave the Dutch oven in the oven when you turn it on for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. I like to make sure the Dutch oven is good and hot, because what you want is that heat in that Dutch oven. When you put the bread first in the oven, it does what's called an oven spring. So you see how small this is now. We would expect it to spring up in the first few moments after you put it in the Dutch oven, and you get that nice rise, like this one rose up very nicely. So I am not real fancy with my scoring. This is the lame I use. It's just a little wooden handled lame, and it comes with this handy little leather pouch that slides into it to keep you from cutting open your fingers in the drawer. So, like I said, I typically don't do anything real fancy. You do want to cut into it good. I probably didn't cut into that one deep enough, and that's why it opened up the way it did. I mean, I have on rare occasion done some fancy work on the scoring, but all in all, it just gets eaten and it doesn't matter that much. I'm not doing this for display purposes. The little water bottle, I just spritz a little water just to add some moisture back to the top. Just helps it have a nice golden coat. So we're going to carefully get that Dutch oven back out of the oven. Like I said, it's good and hot. And then carefully place this in, pulling out that parchment paper. Sometimes it cooperates, sometimes it doesn't. And you want to get that back in the oven as quick as you can. Like I said, so we can get that nice big oven spring. Okay, we're going to bake that for 20 minutes. Even the smaller loaf, I do the first run for sure on 20 minutes. I'll set my timer for 20 minutes. And then what we do is we lift the lid off carefully, take the lid out, and do it for another, from 12 to 14 minutes. Since this is a smaller loaf, I'll probably go with like 12. I did 13 minutes on that one, and you can see it's plenty done without being overdone. I don't like to burn them. I know some people like a really dark crust. I don't like as dark of a crust, so I typically don't do that. But that's it. That's all there is to baking your sourdough bread. And we'll do one quick shot of that one when it comes out of the oven, just to show you what it looks like. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes. I'm just going to show you right quick what this looks like. Carefully slide this out a little bit. Don't burn yourself. You can see that bread. It has risen nicely. We can close it back up. It's already a light tan. We leave it at 460 degrees with the lid off and just do probably another 12 minutes on that, leaving that just like it is. Okay, so bread's all done. We will let it sit for about 2 hours to let it cool down. You want it completely cool before you put it in any kind of container. And you also want to completely cool it before you cut into it and eat it. This used to drive me crazy and the rest of our family when my dad would make artisan bread and he would make us wait until the bread completely cooled, because of course we always wanted to dig in it while it was hot. But if you do that, it does messes with the consistency of the rest of the bread. You can kind of ruin the whole loaf unless you're going to eat the whole loaf. So we do let it cool. It will keep for probably 4 to 5 days before I have any issues with like little specks of white mold, you know, that wants to, just from the moisture in the bread after a few days. But it'll keep well. I usually use it in, put it in just an airtight container, leave it on the counter. You don't want to put it in the fridge. Once it gets past, if you know, those about 4 to 5 days, if we still have bread left, I will slice it and put it in the freezer. It's excellent to pull out and just toast in the oven and make sandwiches or whatever you want with it. After that, it makes great French toast, so I'll do that. The hubby did mention the Dutch oven's looking a little worn after many years of use, and probably, you know, it really kind of embeds, at that high temperature, embeds any stains that are already in your Dutch oven if you use it like I do, which may be for roast or meat or spaghetti and other things, and then also use it for this. At that high temperature, it is going to kind of embed some browning and staining to the Dutch oven. But it's still fully functioning and works great, and so I will continue to use it, and it's fine by me. Hey, just had to add something. Even seasoned bread makers make mistakes, and apparently, although this bread looked really beautiful when we sliced it in and made sandwiches, I do have a little gummy spot right there toward the, kind of getting into the bread a good ways. The first few slices were fine. It's a little gummy spot. Probably just need to add a little bit more time to my baking time. And I don't know if this is just a problem because I'm using more of the all-purpose, or if I needed to maybe add more flour, which I was trying not to add too much. But definitely gonna have to make some adjustments. It's still edible, it's still delicious. I will say that if I freeze it and then toast it, it comes up a weird color. Still edible, still delicious. But this happened to me on the last loaf, and it happened on this one, even though it like I said, rose nicely. So we still all make mistakes. Anyway, that's it. We will attach a link to this video of the recipe, the original recipe that I got from a very sweet neighbor of mine that I have been using for possibly 3 years now. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't tweak a whole lot of it. I've pretty much gone with the original recipe, other than I use my own mix of whatever grains I want to use depending on how I want it to come out. If I want a lighter loaf, I use more all-purpose flour, and if I want a denser, more whole wheat, then just, you know, you do more whole wheat. The end result is still, you know, pretty much the same, other than it just changes the consistency of the bread. So that's it.